Hello and welcome to the Yoga Well podcast. I'm your host, Chase Bossert. Today I have Chris Armstrong from Rochester, Minnesota. And Chris is a trained yoga therapist, longtime practitioner of Vinyasa Yoga. Welcome.
Thank you, Chase. Happy to be here.
Cool. Chris, let's start with your yoga story. How did you get interested in yoga? And specifically, how did you find Vinyasa Yoga? And why did you decide to become a yoga therapist, etc.? Where did yoga start for you?
Yoga started for me when I was in law school studying for the bar. I found a book that I used to do yoga for myself that enhanced the qualities that I wanted to grow. So what you say, what you link to strengthens. I was doing that from this book during law school, and it also helped me study for the bar exam. And through my first law job, which was family law. And then, as life happened, those things fell away. And then I came back to it on the advice of my psychotherapist, who said, when I told her, I'm really bugging myself. And she said, well, when I bug myself, I do yoga. And so then I thought, okay, I'll check it out. And when I checked it out, I became very involved in my home studio, and they offered a yoga teacher training. And one of the teachers in the yoga teacher training was in the yoga therapist training. And so we got a lot of Vinyasa Yoga through him in my 200 hour, and then more yoga therapy in my 300 hour. And when the yoga therapist training was going to be happening in Minneapolis, he encouraged me to apply for that. And I was thinking, oh, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. But then I just went for it. And since then, working with a mentor then has really escalated my personal development. So I've been able to let go of some jobs that were very helpful in some ways, but not in all the ways. And so now I'm all in on yoga therapy.
Well, you have really had you have made a lot of personal decisions that have required a lot of courage in the process of your yoga journey. I know that. So the yoga teacher in your local studio was Kevin Corton. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So very knowledgeable, wonderful
Yes.
teacher. And he was your personal mentor for the therapist training as well, correct?
Yes.
And
I have a lot of gratitude for him.
yeah, well, as I was just saying, I know that you have taken a lot of personal decisions that have required a lot of courage. Leaving your law profession is one. Tell me a little bit, how did you decide to do that?
Sure. So before I was practicing law again, I was working at a Fortune 500 company as a trust officer. But I had worked there for 19 years, but the company was moving away from my values, and it was getting harder and harder to work there. And there was just a time, I think at the same time, this is when I was in the yoga therapist training, I think I was getting stronger. And so when I ended up with a manager who was not a healthy person, she threw me under the bus on a conference call. And so I'm like, okay, I'm done. I have enough money. I can take a year to see what I want to do. And so see what's next. And so I left that full-time position, and almost right away I was offered a half-time position practicing law, which turned out to be great. So then I was able to focus more on the yoga therapist training. And then when they asked me to go full-time, I said, I'm not who you need. You need somebody younger and hungrier. Like, this isn't my path. Here, let me introduce you to some people. And so we parted ways with tears and well wishes. And since then, I've been all in on yoga and yoga therapy.
It's so interesting. So, what is the process by which you go, oh, this is no longer aligning with me and what I want to do? Is it a 2 minute decision? Is it a spur of the moment? Is it something you've been chewing on for a while? And then let me know a little bit about that process.
Sure. It took a little while. I mean, you know, something's not right, but who walks away from a job, you know, after 19 years and making very generous salary and sure there were sales goals, but other people are doing it. Maybe I should just figure out how to suck it up. And but then the more yoga I'm doing, the more I'm thinking, no, I'm diverging, you know, what I want, what my values are, and where the company is going. It's no longer the same direction. So it was gradual until it wasn't. You know, all of a sudden, then I felt strong enough, and I was ready. And when I was ready, then there was no looking back. I had zero regrets. That doesn't mean I didn't cry a lot. I gave 2 months notice because I was really hoping that I could have a warm handoff to my successor, and you know, all my colleagues would come into my office, and you know, it doesn't mean that there weren't lots of tears, but I had zero regrets about that decision.
Right. Well, the decision that you made that was really the one that's a lot of courage. Is like you decided, like, hey, I want to move. I'm, I don't want to live in this house anymore, and
Yeah.
you started looking for another house. And then, so tell me that whole story.
Sure. My husband had a small business that he had for many years. In fact, we moved down here from the Twin Cities so that he could start his small business. And he sold his land that his business was on to a developer, and then he went into a depression. So during this time, I was waiting for him to kind of come out of the depression, but didn't want to pursue any kind of therapy or counseling, didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to eat anything fresh, you know, like anything that might rejuvenate him. And I wasn't prepared to get divorced from him, but I couldn't live under those circumstances. Like he had brought all the things that were in his shop to our property. So he filled up our property and our house, and I felt like there wasn't any room for me there anymore. So I started looking for a house, and I did buy a house in town. So we have two houses that are 20 minutes apart, and I think it woke him up. And you know, that was just about 4 years ago, and we're getting along better than ever because I have my space where I can do my business. And you know, sometimes we stay here, sometimes we stay there. But it's been one of those things, again, the same kind of thing where it's like, I don't know exactly where this is going to go, but I can't think of any reasonable alternatives. I don't even know where the idea came from, but I know.
Well, I tell you, my memory of the decision making process, and of course, I was only peripherally involved because you were working with your mentor and all of that during the process. But my memory is that at some point you had to basically decide, I'm buying this house and I'm moving. And the communication with your husband was, hey, I love you and I want you to come, but I'm going over there.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
he
it's
was invited. He was invited, and he chose not. He chose at that time not to. And so there were several negotiations that have occurred over time before we settled into a pattern.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of, I mean, that's how that happens in every relationship. There's always ongoing negotiations about how things work and what we're doing and all of that. But I just remember being struck by the courage that it took to be willing to, because it was a big financial risk. If I remember right, it wasn't just like you had all the money lying around and you could just buy another house and it's no big deal. It's like, no, it's a commitment. I'm going to have this additional mortgage. I'm going to have to be thinking about, like, how can I pay that? What I really would like to do is yoga. And, I'm taking on an additional financial burden at the same time that I'm really feeling like internally that I want to move away from my job. And, it's like you're saying, I, I didn't want to get divorced. I wanted my husband to snap out of it and come along.
Mhm.
So, but I don't know what's he going to do if I move out. And the piece that was really striking for me was the courage and the faith that you demonstrated. It wasn't, this is not an intellectual thing, right? This is like actual voting with my actions, taking my principles and my practice and applying them in the most important relationships and ways that I know how in my life. And it was really inspiring.
Yes, thank you. It was one of those things where once I got the idea and then I found the perfect place almost right away, which turned out to be right before the pandemic. So that was also amazing. And then it's like you told us in class, like once I made that decision, nobody argued with me. It was like crystal, crystal clear. This is how it's going to be.
Right, right. It's good. Well, talking about this process of faith, I remember also in previous conversations that we've had, you said something along the lines that in the yoga therapy program that the Yoga Well Institute runs, at the beginning of many modules, we have a kind of group check-in where we all sit in a circle and people share for a few moments. This is what's happening in my life or in my professional life with the yoga. And I think you said something along the lines of I could hear people really making brave decisions in those circles. And that was inspiring.
Yes, yes. Before my brave decisions came, I heard other people making brave decisions, and they weren't necessarily logical, but they were also super clear about it. And so then when I started getting my own guidance to do something that is maybe outside the norm, like quit your career before retirement age, or buy a house on your own and see what happens. I was very much heartened to see other people doing brave things, so that when it happened for me, I got to see that there were, that it was really helpful faith wise to see them on their path do the right thing, even though it wasn't necessarily logical.
Yeah. This process of faith and how it develops and how it deepens and whatnot is so interesting. As we do the practice and as we are, held by our teacher, our mentor, and slowly getting more and more connected within ourselves, we start getting these knowings. And it's like, I don't know how I know that, but it's really clear. And this is what I need to do. In the beginning of this process, it's confusing because all of our previous decision making either has to do with intellectual, as you're saying, logical or reasoning, or, all of us have some sort of pattern that we have used to navigate difficult decisions in life. Let me do a pro-con list, or, some people it's purely emotions. It's like, well, I just got totally moved and that's what I just did. And now I'm here and I'm wondering like, what do I do now that I'm here? So, we all have these different patterns related to how we navigate our life. And then yoga starts to change that and institute a different means of decision making. And that process very often asks an individual something challenging, like you're saying, about your career or about your living situation, or, there's lots of examples that people have. And I think this is one of the this is one of the values, or this is one of the joys of being in community, is that in a supportive and nurturing community, people can be vulnerable and really allow others to see what is within their decision-making process without fear of it being used to smear them later or to hurt them later. And that allows other people who are perhaps not in that position quite yet or at that moment, etc., to see like, oh, wow. And then you hear, and being in community means that it's not like one weekend or 1 month. It's, our therapy training is almost 4 years. So you can actually see what happens with the people's, the outcomes when they make those kinds of changes. And that's, it's such a joy to be in a community like that.
It really is. I mean, I had extra training in being logical, so much of my career was about precedent and, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, so to start listening to something else was really mind-blowing. But the message that I saw when we were doing our sharing in the circle was that this really big thing happened and I'm fine. And so when I saw these really big things happening to people and making really brave decisions, it's almost like they're, the knowing comes at the same time that the support reaches that same level. And then there's some more knowing and some more support. And as I saw them be fine, then when my own knowing happened, I knew I'd be fine.
So nice. So beautiful. Well, and you finished the yoga therapist training, which involves doing a functional group, which means 8 weeks and then another 8 weeks with some population that shares the same malady, etc. What did you do yours on?
My functional group is Yoga for Caregivers. I was, at that time, I was working at Mayo Clinic's Healthy Living program. So a lot of my students were patients or the people that come to Mayo Clinic with the patient. So there could be their sister or their spouse or their child. And I saw that these people were really suffering and that they weren't getting attention that they needed. All the attention was on the patient, and they weren't giving themselves what they needed either. And when I started doing some research on how big of a problem was that, it's shocking how many caregivers end up with health issues because they put what they consider to be the person with the bigger problem onto maybe they prioritize that. So that was the subject of my functional group, and I've used it many, many, many times in different settings. So that was a very good investment as functional group goes.
That's very cool. What were the elements what did you see as important in that process, in the course?
Some of the things that are in the course are doing things in increments. So people who are caregivers tend to really give all to the person that they're caring for, really at their own expense. And so some of the elements were doing poses at 60 to 70% of their max, just for the practice of it, or figuring out where halfway was and 3/4 of the way was, so that there's room for both caring for the person who needs it and for themselves. Also, there's a bhavana of bringing in some nourishment, water, the perfect temperature. Then over the course of the 8 weeks, then there's the clear, beautiful water, the perfect temperature, the lake there nearby. There's sparkles of light on the lake, and it ends with a new day. Right?
Fantastic. I love it. And the participants, did you have a wide age range?
I've offered it to people who have been roughly the same age and other people who have had a wider age range, because I've offered it to several different kinds of organizations. As you can imagine, there are caregivers all over. So my most recent place that I've taught class 1 has been as part of a continuing medical education program. I teach it to doctors, and then I share the research with them about how compelling yoga really is.
I see.
But I do,
So you're giving doctors an introduction to yoga as how it can work and what would be self-care, etc.
yes. First, I teach them the class so that they have the experience and see how accessible it is. And then I share some research with them once they are in the zone and can appreciate um, how it can change their state. And then after I share the research with them, I encourage them to share it with their patients' families, and with themselves, because they are caregivers.
They are caregivers. Yeah, it's really true. Yeah. How interesting. So share a couple of your takeaways from this class, Chris. Like, what do you think is important for a doctor to see or to understand or know about yoga?
What I think they experience is that the benefits are very easily accessible. Usually, some of the class has some experience, and half of the class has never done yoga before. In fact, I had one physician who told me he had actively avoided yoga. So I said to him, just try it, see what happens. You might surprise yourself. I said, some people view it as sharpening the saw. And so at the end of the class, he came up and he said, yep, sharpening the saw. So I think what I think the other takeaways are, the class is so the class from beginning to end is 45 minutes, and we spend maybe half an hour of that doing yoga. So I think it's eye-opening to them how we don't need huge amounts of time or huge commitments over time to be able to get the benefits. Like, they feel the benefit right away with a half hour of yoga. And then when I share the research with them, they're not even that surprised, because they feel it. Like, they feel what it can do.
That's cool. What kind of research are you sharing with them?
The research is all the wide range of health and mental health and physical health issues that it can provide some relief for. Also, that it has benefits in terms of additional positive side effects. So then I usually make a joke like, "Can you say that about medication?" Everybody gives a little chuckle at that point. And then other things are that beginners can get the benefits right away. One super compelling piece said that having established the physical and mental health benefits of yoga makes it ethically questionable to assign participants to an inactive control group. Like, that's pretty strong words for research.
That
Um,
is.
but yeah, yeah. Um, so there's some laughing that happens as I'm weaving the research in there, because I asked them, there's one review where they compared exercise and yoga. So I asked them, I set them up a little. I say, how many of you recommend exercise to your patients? And of course, just about everybody raises their hands. And then I laid the research on them that yoga is as good as, and sometimes better than, exercise for this long, long list of maladies. So we have fun.
Very cool. I think also there's a big question about what is yoga. So someone who has not done yoga is just bombarded with different kinds of images. And some of it is, very strong exercise related stuff. And some of it is people in saffron robes and whatnot. And so to actually get into a class and to be led in coordinated breathing and movement and encouraged to move within their comfortable range of movement, etc., I'm sure is a very powerful experience.
Yes, yes. In fact, usually afterwards, when I ask people to compare how they felt at the beginning of class to the end of class, they surprise themselves with how better they feel physically, how, in fact, one of the words that came at the end of class when I taught it this last Saturday was triumphant. I'm like,
Oh,
ooh,
all
so
right.
good, right?
It's good. New definition of yoga, triumphant. Okay. Besides continuing and working as a yoga therapist, etc., you also decided to join Yoga Well's assistantship program in our current yoga therapy training. Tell me about why'd you decide to do that? And
One of the reasons why was because I have been so pleased with how the mentorship works and how a person really has the chance then to take their personal development in some really large leaps with the help of a mentor. And so, as being an assistant, I get a chance to be a program mentor. So, I help people navigate the practicum requirements and help them with anything to do with the program. They also have a personal mentor that they work with. Sometimes the program mentor and the personal mentor are the same person, or sometimes the program mentor will work with the personal mentor. It's been so very satisfying to cheer these people on. Like, I can see the lights they have to shine and they can't see it yet. So it's something I think you have shared before. Like, if you don't have faith, you can borrow your teacher's faith. So I just feel like I'm a library of faith for my students, and they can borrow as much and keep it for long. There's no fines. They can have it as long as they want. If they need more, I'll give them more. And
well,
it's
you
really
have
been quite
certainly,
lovely then to see them blossom.
yeah, well, you have certainly demonstrated the faith in your own life. That is for sure. Yeah, I was just going to say a little bit about our program. So we in our therapy programs, and actually in all our programs, we have two levels. We have students who are for the most part new to our program, and then we also have a level of assistants, and the assistants are people who have already taken the program before and been out for some time and been practicing and implementing, and or they've been long time Vini yoga practitioners, and we just everybody is in the room as a student, and it's really wonderful for the training because we've seeded the training with people who have a lot of experience and who have already heard the material multiple times. And, for a lot of people, the first go around in one of our trainings, it's the perspective that we're presenting is so different from the everyday, perspective that the person has operated under for how many decades, that just assimilating that and trying to get organized and figure out like, well, how does this work is a lot. And it's in those circumstances, it's sometimes hard to know like, well, what are my questions? But then you have this second layer of people who have already done all that, who've already been, have already integrated and arrived, and they have a lot of questions. And so you give them all the material a second time. It's like, oh, I have my question. What about this? What about that? How does this work with this other concept? How you put those things together? And, the questions that are raised and the examples that are given by the assistants in the program add so much to the experience of the students and also to the to me and to the faculty. I just love it as a structure for our trainings. As you were saying, from your own decision making process, and you're facing these big decisions, it's so helpful to have somebody that you're working with that knows you well, that you know cares about you, that can hold the space for you, and can be a real reliable sounding board, not telling you what to do, not telling you that this is what needs to happen, but just saying, like, you sound clear to me, or I'm not sure that this is going to be your final decision just yet. Let's wait, keep practicing, and let's see where you end up next time we meet. To have that is so helpful and so useful. And when that is combined with people who are also in the training and holding space, as assistants and whatnot, I just think it's really powerful. So I'm so glad that you joined us and decided to do it again and go through and serve this role with people. It's really lovely.
Yes, thank you. Now when I take notes instead of pages and pages, I just try and capture the magic. But there's a lot of magic.
I in my youth, I used to go and listen to a particular band play regularly, and it would get to be the thing that you heard a lot of their songs. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to hear this song live, et cetera, et cetera. It just became, I don't care what they play. I just know that at some points in the concert that all the different instruments will come together, and the sum of that will be much greater than all of those individual pieces together. And there'll be some magic that you just have to be in the hall to hear it.
I love that. That's great. Yep, that's about what it's like.
You heard it before. It's coming back down around again. But that's a really interesting perspective. I haven't heard it like that. I haven't thought about it in that way. So, having actually now, what are we, 2 years into, almost 2 years into this second training? What has struck you as a student again in the process?
As you said, I'm less concerned about trying to capture every little detail, and I get a chance then to just relax, and I get to the pleasure of seeing other people have epiphanies when they hear the information for the first time. Like, that's super fun. But now I get to, like, it's kind of like how you make a recipe your own, you can try this and try that and think about how this sutra matches up with that sutra and apply it in your own life. I feel like I have more room for application and reflection than I did the first time around. Then that helps me weave the fabric in a different way, so I have different things to share.
Yeah. Mr. Deshakachar said that he studied all 4 books of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra with his father 7 times. So he went, sutra by sutra through the entire book 7 different times. And, there's such value in that. That was my own experience, that I didn't actually care what Mr. Deshakachar was teaching or what his senior teachers were teaching. I just wanted to see what was going to happen today. And how is the material going to be unfolded, and how is this going to be linked with something else? And, of course, you always know what the topic is going in, but I didn't choose things for topics. I chose things for when in my schedule can I be there? So I heard the same material so many times and in so many different ways. And, that is so helpful because it fills out and it kind of, it grows in you. And over time, that growth doesn't stop either. It's like the seed has been put in you. And as you continue to reflect on it or talk about it or share it with somebody else, etc., it is refreshed and is new each time. And I think that's a really, really important part of studying this knowledge system, this yoga, is that it's a lifetime ongoing study. And some people, if they hear that, they may think like, well, don't you know everything already? It's like, well, no, it keeps unveiling itself and revealing itself, and like more is there. And it's almost alive. It's very interesting. And I just so appreciate that you are also along for the ride.
Yeah, it's been so lovely to go through the sutras with you through my yoga therapist cohort and then doing them again as an assistant. And I'm also chanting on Sundays with Dolphy. So we're in chapter 2 now. So I have the vibrational experience in community. And it's so surprising because you and Dolphy are not coordinating, but there are many, many times when we're talking about the same thing, the same set of sutras. And that's how I know I am where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. You're working now at Mayo Clinic, and you're also doing some other integrative medicine things. Tell me a little bit about what all you're doing and where you see yourself headed now.
Sure. So I'm working at Mayo Clinic's Healthy Living program, where I teach part of continuing medical education programs and also occasionally as part of corporate retreats, which I love to plant the seeds of yoga there too. I'm also teaching as part of their habit program to yoga to couples where one of the participants has mild cognitive impairment. Um, Through Mayo, I'm also teaching yoga for grief support, a 6-week functional group. I've taught that 3 rounds. And it's been really, really lovely to see people, their capacity to expand, to hold their loved one in a new way over the course of those 6 weeks. And we've also done not just for losing people, but also grief of any kind. I'm also working with the other major medical facility here in town, Olmsted Medical Center. I teach yoga to healthcare professionals, and they have a contract with the local police and fire department. So I teach yoga to the police and fire departments. And of course, my own business where I see people one-on-one and provide custom sequences for them to do that are 10 to 20 minutes long. That they hopefully do daily. I encourage them to do it daily and we'll support them to make sure that they do. And every 3 months, give them a new one to help them move forward in a way that makes sense for them. And it's been doing that. I started out doing that as in my practicum hours and during my yoga therapist training. And there have been some people that have been with me this whole time. And it's been amazing to see how their personal development, the trajectory has just taken off once they start doing one-on-one.
Yeah, I have to say that also is a very satisfying part of my own work, is that, you get to be with people. And I've had some people now that have been studying with me for almost 20 years. And that is really interesting. You see the whole trajectory of their life and the decisions they made and where they're going and what they're doing. And it's been stunning. This one-on-one interactions that Mr. Deshigachar trained us to do, it's really powerful. It was really, really powerful. And you're a different person every so often. So why would you be doing the same practice for the rest of your life? It should be revised and updated to match who you are and what you're doing. It's really a wonderful and interesting perspective. Before you go, I want to hear a little bit about the yoga for grief. That's obviously a huge topic, but what are some of your salient takeaways from having taught this course, and what's important, or how does it work? Or
Sure. It's based on the Panchamaya, the five dimensions that we all have that are interwoven. And so we start out um, bringing some pacification, hopefully, to the physical aspect that we have. And in terms of asana, the asana that we do is mostly Purvatana. I mean, so that we're creating some space in people's chest and upper body. And this can be done seated or standing. We meet people where they're at. It's been really, really lovely to see how effective it is. And in fact, we've had some people that have had dementia. And so we wondered how that was going to work because the people had been stuck in a loop of grief for quite some time and we weren't sure. But there's something about that adding the physical aspect to it that created some bigger capacity so that at the end of 6 weeks, even though there were tears in class every week, at the end of 6 weeks, one person in particular comes to mind. She was able to really fondly remember her partner and kind of picture a life going forward with good memories of her partner without the weight of the grief, which doesn't mean that it wasn't hard or that she didn't, that she just whitewashed everything. She had the capacity to hold it all, and it was gorgeous.
nice, super. Yeah, it's so interesting how the physical part and the breathing part can be so helpful in changing the mind and the emotions, and that we can really access and relieve one part of the system by working with a different part of our system. So I'm sure that you're being very helpful. Yeah.
Another lovely part that we've noticed is the sense of community. So being with other people who are having that hard part of their lives be front and center has been really, really beneficial. So
Right.
as much as one-on-one can serves one thing, community has a whole
Yeah.
additional benefit.
Yeah. It's so interesting. This is such an important part because there's such an emphasis in the IAYT, the International Association of Yoga Therapists, on the individualization of yoga as key to its being therapeutic. And that just is not the way that our lineage has worked. The individualization of it is for everybody, whether it's Chikitsa therapy or Rakshana maintenance or Shikshana discovery. Like all this individualization part is such a foundational piece of everything we do, not only therapy. And then you look at, it's actually some of the most therapeutic stuff we can do is be in community with other people who are also doing the work. And that's what I was saying earlier about your watching other people in your other students in the share time of the yoga therapist program, and there's a community and you see what they're doing and it's so helpful, and then it's such a resource when you yourself get there, and then here you are and teaching these community of caretakers or of people grieving. And it's so nice to be around other people who are facing the same challenges and have the same difficulties. And that's so healing in and of itself. Very interesting. Well, Chris, where can we find you on the interwebs?
I have a website. My website is currently, but maybe change soon. The current name is chrisarmstrongyoga.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. You will see me share what other people offer frequently, because I think there's room for us to lift other people up. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well,
So in
even if you
addition
get a
to,
new website, that you still just keep that old website and just direct it to your new one so people can still
oh,
find you.
thank you. Good advice.
It's wonderful to have you on in our podcast. Thank you very much. And it's so nice to be interacting with you over all these years. Thank you, Chris.
Yes. Thank you, Chase.